Have you ever wondered what your life would be like if you had received everything you had ever wanted? Have you ever realized that in order to live a life we wish for ourselves, we tend to lie and behave differently just to get along with a group of people who can possibly give you the objects of your desires? But there was also times when we were given the opportunity to do something but failed to act on it because we were too scared to see the possible consequences of what might happen if we did act on those very actions. What I'm trying to really insinuate is those very actions might be seemingly very risky, seemingly very scary, but those are also the things that you really want. And those are things that, if actually done, would actually be the things that could possibly give you the things that you're so passionate about. But it may be the case that if you are to do it, it might cause a lot of things to might also go in disarray. It's like taking a risk, perhaps, a leap of faith, but you're too scared of what might possibly happen that you end up doing nothing. You have no courage. In this episode, we will be talking about the great tragedy and the dramatic novel The Idiot by Fyodor Dostoevsky. This novel in particular, one character, Prince Myushkin, inspired me to actually make this podcast. You see, this was a time when my academics were not going so well, and I had recently had an epileptic seizure, along with the devastating rejection from a person I fondly admired. Truth be told, I had no reason for seeing anything positive in the world I was living in. I had every reason to reject the current trajectory I have set on in and move towards one that was more promising and fulfilling, and a goal that was more fulfilling. One which would guarantee me a good life, one where I could remain comfortable, according to the eyes of society, that is. I was told by my college counselor at that time that despite my drop in my academic performances, it was not too bad for me to get into a decent college outside of India. Yet this idea presented me with a huge form of emptiness inside of me, as it would require me to discontinue the thing that I adore and admire so much, my true love, or one of my love, and one of my interests, that is music, with the same zeal that I have been doing throughout the whole of my life, throughout most of my life. Well, almost magically, this was the book that I had been reading during that time, as it helped me get some form of direction on what exactly I am to do from here on in. Let me tell you something about Prince Myushkin before I tell you what decision I made and what really I'm doing. Because of his epileptic condition, he was not able to properly educate himself. By the way, I'm talking about Prince Myushkin right now. So let me tell you about something about Prince Myushkin. Because of his epileptic condition, he was not able to properly educate himself. And when he came back to Russia, he was mocked and jeered at for his stupidity, naturally. This lad, though, embraced the laughter that the people amongst him had and enjoyed the idea of being the butt of all jokes. He had this innocence within him, wherein he spoke what he thought to whomever he saw. He behaved in the same way wherever he went. Now, I would also like to further emphasize on something that Prince Myushkin used to normally do, which I would like to, make a parallel on what Socrates used to do. This guy was just a guy who was curious, right? And because he was curious, what he would do is he would see a bunch of people who are considered to be very smart because of the knowledge they have possessed and because of the works that they have committed. And he will just ask questions to them, saying, "Hey, I find what you're doing very interesting. Could you possibly explain it to me?" And through this constant questioning that he's having with his interlocutor, you see, what will often happen is, because he doesn't know anything, the interlocutor is actually forced to explain everything he knows. And because he's forced to explain everything he knows, it's actually being a test of his own knowledge. Now, here's where the most interesting thing that happens within all of human beings, in my opinion, is that is, there are times where we feel that we know something, but in reality, we don't actually know that thing. It's just there in our heads. And Prince Myushkin makes people realize that. He makes people realize that they don't know what they actually thought they knew. And this is the reason why some of the characters in the novel kind of hate this lad. But at the same time, he also presents them a reason for them to grow as an individual. Now, let us continue to my next point now. I mean, we all have this certain etiquette to be followed, you know. While eating food, we're supposed to use a fork and knife, and maybe when we're presented with some people, we are supposed to have a napkin under our laps, etc., etc. When we are going to school, we are supposed to wear school uniforms. And again, as I said, we are presenting ourselves differently in different occasions. But the prince, no, he doesn't understand all these things because he was having the treatment of his epilepsy back in Sweden. Or I think it was Sweden. I'm pretty sure it's Sweden. Now, once he was in Russia at the age of 27, it had been under control. Because of his candid behavior, some people some people around him also hated him, but also seemed to love him because of it. Now, here's where things get interesting. Now, let me expand on the fact of why people loved him for his candid behavior, right? Because you see, when a person is frank, when the person tells what they're honestly feeling on a subject of matter, they would not hide anything, would they? They would tell you what they truly feel, right? And well, the funniest thing with Prince Myshkin is also the fact that he does not want to hurt people. He knows that if I am to make a certain statement, I might be hurting people. So what he does is he presents it in a very, how do I say it, in a very beautiful way. Even though the thing that he's pointing out to the individual might be something that is, humiliating, perhaps that's a word to say. But he presents it in a way that makes the other person feel comfortable about themselves, and that's again what I find to be very interesting, that this guy is able to realize society in a very different way. He's able to connect with people's emotions in a much more relatable way, and which is quite paradoxical in its nature, because this guy has no experience when it comes down to conversing with people. He was a guy who just magically appeared one day, and who magically appeared one day in Russia, who nobody knew what he was doing. He has some knowledge. He read some books while he was getting cured. But genuinely, how is this guy who has little to no background in education or in anything able to understand people's emotions so well? And that's exactly why you were also able to see that he was. That's also partly the reason why he was loved. And again, people genuinely like honest people. But not only he is honest, he also does this honesty in a very nice way, which is also something one must realize, that sometimes if you're too honest and you just tell everything that you think, you will tend to be hated. You will tend to be disliked by a few. And this is particularly by one of the characters in this novel named Natasha Filiponova. Now, I will talk more about Natasha Filiponova maybe later on, but how about this? I'll tell you about Natasha Filiponova right now, that is. You see, Natasha Filiponova is one of the most interesting characters in this novel. In fact, what I find is one must even really empathize with her genuinely based on her experiences. You see, she was actually raped. Not only raped, she was sexually harassed when she was a young child. Now, because she was sexually harassed and even raped when she was a young child, it is very natural of her to have a very low and a very nasty and bitter view of society. But this wasn't the case for Prince Myshkin. He always saw the world as a beautiful place. And maybe it's because he lacked that experience, those bitter experiences, especially in his formative years. You actually tend to see him try to consciously be aware of the fact that even though he's trying to present something that might be bad to an individual, he does it so in a way that the individual seems to accept and like. But Natasha Filiponova, because throughout her childhood has been derided, and God knows what, man, she has been through terrible situations. And remember I told you about how she was sexually harassed and even raped as a child? That person, whose name was Totsky, decides to marry another girl. Would you look at that? And that too when she was 17. Natasha Filiponova always thought that she was the one that's going to get married to Totsky, because that Totsky was the guy that was sexually harassing her. But no, that never happened. So you can genuinely see why Natasha Filiponova absolutely, when she confronts people with the truth, she is often hated, she is often disliked, and people often said, this lady is a demon, she is pathetic. And guess what? There's also something I must put on even further. If people come to realize, especially in those very times, and even in the current day situation, that you are not pure, or even not more specifically pure, you are put into these very nasty situations, it's very difficult and very hard for you to get any form of acceptance and likeliness, and any form of social acceptance, at least in terms of society. You see, you will often be rejected by society as a whole, because that's just how things are. You mean, you would always want to marry a person who's pure, right? For some weird reason, that's how society worked back in those times. Now, I'll tell you. Let's go about another character now, who is like, again, about Prince Mushkin. Now, I went to a completely different trajectory, but that trajectory was to emphasize the point that if you have a good experience, or if you have the lack of knowledge, or maybe if you are presented in a way where you think life is beautiful, you will also probably present that idea to the rest of the world. And you would do so, and by in doing so, you will, even though you are being honest, you are also making people like you. Now, here's where things get interesting. Aglaya was one of the most prettiest girls in St. Petersburg, and she falls in love with Prince Mushkin. They complement each other, and it's wrong to say that they don't enjoy each other's company. Yet it so happens that Aglaya is afraid. She is afraid because Prince Mushkin has been suddenly having a series of epileptic fits, not having a stable job, and not having much money to live by. He's having money, but not so much. And a side note here, Aglaya comes from a very high middle class of society. Therefore, the idea of being with someone like the prince fears her. Even though she's afraid, she cannot imagine a life without the prince. Here we see here we see Aglaya, through the entire part of the story, entirely being confused whether she wants to be with the prince or not. In the end, sadly, they don't end up with each other. She marries someone else, and they get divorced very quickly. Mind you, those times being a divorced woman is a terrible quality to have. Mushkin goes mad because his illness had gotten worse. It could have been because of all the stress he had recently been in. Now, like I have mentioned in the beginning of this video, in the end, love is like taking a leap of faith, wherein we decide upon following through in something even though there is no clear outcome. So to really do anything is almost entirely difficult. I would like to pose a quote by the philosopher Soren Kierkegaard: "Do it or do not do it, you will regret both." There are times in life where we are given difficult scenarios to choose between two things we truly love. But in those times, once we follow through with it, we will always seem that the other option might possibly give us a better life, a grander life, and it could have made me, and maybe that other option would have possibly been more fulfilling. In modern day terms, what I have just stipulated, the grass is always greener on the other side of the field. We see the fussiness and confusion, particularly from the character like Aglaya and Natasha Filiponova. When you are so concerned about your reputation and the repercussions of your actions, you will end up not being able to do anything with your life. And in Natasha Filiponova's case, you might just end up dying. Hence, you see, one of the easiest solutions to such problems is to be like the prince. Be yourself, whomever you are, in whatever scenario comes your way. You might not know the value of what you're doing, as you just decide to do something on impulse. But being patient enough to communicate through those misunderstandings that might happen along the way, and happily accepting everything happening, is the way to be. You might be called stupid for not weighing your options carefully enough, but understand that this is always better than being scared in life and doing nothing, and being completely perplexed on what exactly is the better option. Speaking of working, let's talk about the other theme in this novel: acceptance and love towards yourself. The absurd, especially that was the absurd that was coined by the writer and philosopher, by the French writer and philosopher Albert Camus, is a state of being where you're directionless and there is a sense of ambiguity in where you're going in life. You could live in the belief that life has a grander meaning that supersedes your given life, but at the same time, not having a clue or idea of what the future will hold. So there you have no real you don't really have any fantasies, hence no real idea of what you want to do. You could also be stuck in the past, shedding crocodile tears for previous highs in life, but still not knowing what you want to do with it. For an honest person who's true to themselves, the easiest way to escape the absurd might probably be suicide. That is commonly referred to as death. But people could also hope by believing that a given plan could work. They could hope that the action of doing whatever they can may possibly lead to better times. Hence, what one can say from all this is that the concept of perseverance and one's own ability are spectators to the three entities of the absurd, hope, and death. Here, I think here I think this is where the middle class seems to get it all correct, in my opinion. When you have tried all you can in a particular field you're passionate about, and you realize the falsehood that you have created, the absurd shall encompass you. And hence, this reminds me of the character in The Idiot, Varvara. She is the brother, and even she tells her brother and even to herself that they have done everything that they can, and all they can do now is to just live with it. Well, you see, she had a husband. You see, she keeps good health. She's also able to live. The realization that you have nothing original that you can make your own is a very important one, as it shows that you can finally let go of all the falsehoods around you and live with the idea of just living and with what your life has already offered for you, you know. Enjoy the things that surround you, you know. For Varvara, it was her family. Well, for me, it's my books and the music I've listened to, the music that I have been playing, the grades that I have possibly done, and the music that I have composed. I may have some form of disappointment from my family, but I still have myself, and that is something of my own. And I still have something of my own. So just learn to live with that. You see, the poor people will resent the rich for not giving them anything to live with, and the rich will hate everyone who are just like them in order to showcase who really is the best. This idea of rat races will exist in both extremes. But this endless cycle of the continuity of cowardice and courage, and this continuity of the cycle of continuity and courage will never end, and it will always be the case in these two extreme ends. But in the middle class, it won't exist. This is because they have chosen to accept and enjoy themselves for however they are. To me personally, the idea of knowing everything would be of to me personally the idea of that everything would die eventually, and hence the subject to when it will die should be taken by the individual as a matter of indifference. This, in my opinion, is the way for one to tackle the absurd. Please don't take my opinion on this as a fact, as I'm just a boy curious in philosophy, and hence my understanding on these concepts can be deeply flawed. More importantly, I've been only reading the Myth of Sisyphus just like 2 3 weeks back, and I just finished like the first chapter. So because I've only finished the first chapter, my concept of or my idea of what the absurd is might also be flawed. In fact, I'm still building on to it. I just thought it would be a good idea to talk about whatever I have read on the Myth of Sisyphus in this novel, because it seemed to make a point. It helped me make a point at least. So just putting that on a side note, yeah. In the end, you know, if something passionate were to strike your head again, like how it did for the narrator in the White Knights, well, that's amazing. But there is seriously no harm in being okay, or heck, there is seriously no problem in being a failure and a loser. If you just accept that, hey, this is what I am, I'll continue doing whatever I can, and as long as I'm having the ability to live, that's fine by me, you know. The last character I would like to talk about is Hippolyte. He's a guy who has been diagnosed with severe diseases. Now, for whatever reason, this disease, which was supposed to make him die within a few weeks' time, somehow manages to persist for several months. People start to doubt his true condition, but more importantly, the boy himself seems to be envious of the life of everyone around him that they were able to live. He coughs with such intensity that he falls unconscious, and other times cannot speak because of it. But knowing that there are those who are well off, better off, than him leading better lives because they had a better body makes him very sad. Ultimately, it made me realize that we can never possibly know what the other person is going through. And rather than dismissing them because of the standards that society has of what a set people of a certain stage should uphold to, be more forgiving. Please, people work hard, and I truly believe that, Nobody is lazy. It's just that reality hits them too hard. They become really scared and they are all alone, deprived of anyone to love them. So, I, on the other hand, they have deprived of anyone to love them, and they have no hope, and they have no courage to pull themselves up. I, on the other hand, prefer to call these people misunderstood and confused. The older we tend to get, we take less risks, and we have to be realistic if anything. Society has control of your will, and you don't possess any choice beyond a point. Or maybe not. Or maybe it is. I don't know. Well, what I'm trying to say is that if you're constantly stuck into this idea of what other people will think of you and what you should conform to be, of course you will be scared, and of course you will not be able to do anything. And at the same time, if you're too scared of you knowing that if you are to do something, you might possibly fail on that very thing, or if you're to continue not working and just give it up, right? Would all your efforts that you have done in the past just by will be meaningless, right? Like what I have informed earlier about the middle class of people. Well, no. Even though you have worked hard before and now everything you're working towards that same thing is not leading you any results, does not necessarily make everything of your previous goals to be gone. Like I have said, maybe it's all about the journey and not the destination, like how Herself had said. Or you could perhaps say that there might be some deeper meaning into things. But what I have taken away from The Idiot and from Dostoevsky in this novel is the fact that it's all about acceptance of your given scenario and coming to love yourself with what you have. You see, everyone is too afraid and too concerned about what everyone else is doing that we don't even care about what we want to do. We forget that many times. And because we forget that many times, we just do things because that's what is supposed to be called progress. you know Sometimes, man, it's just about having fun for life. Who cares? Everyone is too caught up in their own lives that they don't even realize that if they just do one small action for themselves, nobody will really care. Nobody will really have the time and concern to actually see what you're doing. Of course they would appreciate it or despise it, but that's only for a small fraction of their time. In conclusion, money, social status, and all these norms of society in regards to the responses that will be elicited is what we fear in life. This can lead to us making wrong decisions in life. On the contrary, a total rebellion of such a behavior will also lead to misery because you have no one who can possibly understand you or help you. But really, reading this book makes one thing clear, that nobody has any idea of what they're doing in their lives. In the end, I guess, it is better to be sad, knowing the worst, than to be happy, living in a fool's paradise. Remember, to die bearing no hatred to the happiness that those amongst you would receive. And if you live in that way, I think you'll be fine, you'll be happy, because now you're only concerned and comparing yourself with who you were before. Well, thank you, and this has been, as I have mentioned earlier, why this book was very important to me. As I said, it was a very tremulous point of time in my life. Uh, well, the decision I made was to take a gap year and to try to see how much I possibly can do in music. Not only to see how much I possibly can do in music, I want to give myself a chance, to see where it will go. And like how Barbara said, if you have given something everything you can and you still fail, then it's better to it's all right. You can just move on to other things, and guess what, you will also feel good about it. But at the same time, if you don't, you'll feel good about it, and you can easily move on to the next thing in life, because Varvara did really give her best, and once she came to that realization that I've done everything I could, and maybe I'm not suited, I don't have anything great within me, nothing original I had within me, because she had come to that realization and accepted her scenario, and she came to that realization and she came to understand that scenario because she did everything she could, hence she was able to be happy in life, right? So that's what I've also possibly trying to do with my life as well. I'm trying to do everything I can with music, and just probably call it quits. And maybe once I realize that I have nothing good within me in music, or maybe the contrary, maybe I do have good in music, but once let's just say I don't have anything good in music, I can finally close books on that and move on to something else. There would not be something gnawing with my heart anymore, you know and even at the same time, even if I do give everything in music, I should not hold that thing against me, that life promised me so many things, yet if you put in efforts you can get everything you want. No, again, as I said, it's not that, right? It's about accepting your given situation, and that's what I want to do. I want to accept my situation, and in order to accept my situation, you need to give yourself time, and that time can be reflection, and that kind of time can possibly be doing everything you can. That's all I wanted to say. um, yeah, I'm also doing what I can for the other thing that I deeply enjoy, that is computer science. People often ask me whether I want to do music or computer science. I said I don't know, I enjoy doing both. And what I have realized is that just keep trying. You just keep trying, and you accept things for whatever they are, because they are a resemblance of who you are as an individual, right? And if you can love yourself, you'll be fine. And if you don't associate your efforts and your shortcomings, or even not your shortcomings, even your real highs in life, both of those things, to those around you, and I think you'll possibly be fine. That because that quote, that I've mentioned at the very end, that was actually said by none other than Prince Mushkin. And that's what I truly believe in, and that's again something about me personally. Now, I want to also tell one more thing. Like I had said in the very beginning of this episode, right? If you have led a life where you were maybe abstracted much, not abstracted, maybe abstracted, that's a good word, or not shown much of knowledge in life as it is, or you're presented with life in a much more good way, um, you would naturally try to help and make the world a better place. And if you see life to be a very much divested and a pathetic place, you would often associate that, you would often tell people and even confront people in the same way. And not only will you do that, you might even tell them things that might possibly even help them in the wrong way, rather than doing it in the way that can make themselves come to understand themselves and make them grow as individuals. But I truly believe that even I had hard times growing as a child. But what is making me grow up as an individual and realize these things is just reading books, man. Reading books, watching movies and literature and music, all of those things cumulatively is making me get a better idea of what I wanted to do in life. And this is exactly why I decided to make the podcast The Idiot, because I genuinely want people to realize this, that I want people to have maybe some form of introduction to these great books and great ideas that I'm getting from these books, and maybe they can possibly read those books and hence get out of this perpetual cycle of fear and anxiety, as well as lack of courage. And once they get out of it, they can possibly either they can possibly do something with their lives. They, even if they're doing something with their lives, maybe come to enjoy it. Maybe it might not be in a very peaceful state like how it was before, but it will be in some state where you can do something. How I have stated that one must hope in order to get out of the absurd, and how that hope should not be in the some form of very weird state that, oh, things might just get better. No, that hope should not be in this very weird and ambiguous state, but having some form of direction, some form of plan. But you don't some form of direction and some form of plan, right? That I'll just do this because I think it's right. Not really conforming yourself like, okay, I know I'm going to get rich because I will get rich because I'm suffering, I'm going to get rich. Because the more you suffer, the better things will become eventually. No, but you have some form of idea, okay, maybe if I do this, I hope that if I do this and I do whatever I'm doing right now to achieve this, something, I think my life will get better. You have, short term goals, and that can possibly make you get out of the absurd, like I have mentioned. Maybe you would not get a really grander life, but you're going somewhere with it. You see, what I'm trying to say is, trying to really, really point out is that these books are great in making you appreciate yourself and find some form of direction in a world which initially gives you a lot of false promises in the beginning. Not only does it give you false promises, it's scary. It keeps changing, and to your dissatisfaction, it changes too much to your own liking. Well, I guess, thank you, and maybe I'll see you later. Bye bye.